What's up everyone, Chris coming to you from Salty Island, and if you're catching this video on Friday, I want to congratulate you for making it through 2021, and if you're watching it any other time, then Happy New Year. I want to take a moment to thank everyone in the Salty Legion for spending this year with us. The channel has lasted a lot longer than I ever thought when I started this, and in the next year, we want to do even more content and things for you, so please consider hitting that like if you play GW games, and maybe even the subscribe button if you're a tabletop gamer. And to start off the new year right, this video is going to cover two of our new goals. First, we're playing a brand new game on the channel, 3rd edition of Age of Sigmar, and even more exciting than that, this is the start of our community battle reports. Today's game is 600 points for Path to Glory, and on top of that, we have a brand new Maggotkin of Nurgle rules taking on my Blades of Khorne army. Now, as our first honorary guest, tell us who you are and what is this nastiness that you've brought into the Salty HQ.
Hey guys, my name is Matt. I'm here to play a game, Path to Glory with Chris. I am bringing Maggotkin of Nurgle. Really excited to try out this new book. I'm starting at 600 points, so this list will be 550 because it was a little tricky getting right up to the 600 point. That being said, I brought 5 Blight Kings, a unit of 10-man Plague Bearers, and the hero I chose, I named him Sneedo, the Lord of Blights. He is right there in the middle, kind of, and we'll see what we can do. As far as command traits go, I got the command trait. I forget the name of it, but it essentially is, I believe it's Overwhelming Stench. Any unit within 7 can't receive command abilities or anything juicy like that. If they're wholly within 7, they also cannot issue any. For his artifact, I gave him the Split Horn Helm, which will cause his army-wide 5-up save on him himself only changes to a 4-up. So he has a 4-up Feel No Pain, which should be really good of keeping him staying alive. And that's what I brought today, and looking forward to playing against Khorne.
And for my army list, I have my Blades of Khorne. I'm not running a sub-faction, that way I'm free to choose my first artifact and my first command trait. So my warband is led by Hakar the Bloodflare. He is a Bloodthirster of Insensate Rage, and he's got the artifact Harvester of Skulls, giving him +1 attack, and the command trait Slaughterborn, which lets him re-roll all hit rolls for attacks made with melee weapons. I also have a second leader, a Bloodsecrator. His name is Core Deathcaller. And then I have one battle line unit, a 10-man unit of Bloodreavers that has a lot of good synergies with the Bloodsecrator. And lastly, I have a Khorgorath. And while he isn't a monster, he's a pretty chunky boy, and he's been known to tie up some units. In today's mission, we're playing Breakout from the Narratives Play section on the core rulebook. Nurgle is invading the lands, hoping to spread the Garden of Nurgle even further. They're deployed in the upper half of the board, 12 inches away from enemy units, and their mission is to get as many units within 7 inches of the bottom edge of the table as they can. Once a unit reaches the 7-inch range on the bottom edge, and there are no enemy units within 3, they can opt to escape the battlefield. And then they're free to spread Papa Nurgle's plagues, bringing new and rotted life to these lands. The forces of Khorne are deployed on the bottom corners of the table, and their sole purpose is to keep the forces of Nurgle from reaching their lands, and if even one unit makes it through, then their lands are going to risk having vile corruption. As the invaders, Nurgle gets the choice of going first or second, and they opt to take the second turn, clearly hoping to take advantage of a double turn later on in the game. Nurgle also has a new mechanic, or a revamped mechanic, the Wheel of Contagion. This is an army special mechanic that represents the cycle of death and rebirth, and we roll a dice in the beginning of the game to see where the wheel will begin, and we're starting off of Fecund Vigor. All units heal D3 wounds instead of just 1 in the hero phase. Not the best place for turn 1, but it is going to open up some interesting options as it moves through the cycle later in the game. Both sides opt for rolling for the bonus command point and succeed, and we're getting started here. starting off with the forces of Khorne moving up, looking to cut off the obvious direct path out, but they have some respectable charges that they're going to need to make if they want to get into close combat on this first turn. And in the charge phase, the Bloodreavers, with +1 thanks to the banner, make it in on their initial charge. However, the attempt for the Bloodthirster fails. The Bloodthirster is going to spend the command point for forward to victory, allowing it to reroll the charge, but it ends up with an even worse roll, and so the Bloodreavers are going to have to make do against the Plague Bearers. The Bloodreavers pile in, making sure to stay 3 inches away from the Blight Kings, not wanting to drag them into combat yet this turn. With 8 of them getting into combat range, the Bloodreavers have 1 attack each, plus a bonus attack from the Bloodsecrator, and an additional bonus attack for the Bloodsecrator counting as a totem. That gives 25 attacks total, hitting on 4s, wounding on 4s. That lands a total of 14 hits and 6 wounds. New to the Maggotkin, the entire army has a 5+ ward save across the entire army. For you 40k fans, a ward save is basically a feel no pain roll that can be taken against any wounds, including mortal wounds, and that makes this army incredibly resilient. The Plague Bearers soak 2 wounds, and in addition, Plague Bearers now have 2 wounds each as compared to Khorne's 1 wound. This gives this unit essentially 20 wounds and definitely makes it feel like Chaos Space Marines vs Space Marines all over again. As only 2 Plague Bearers fall, the Plague Bearers pile in and swing back, hitting on 4s and wounding on 3s. In addition, when the roll to hit is a 6, it triggers Nurgle's second mechanic called Disease, giving the unit it hits 1 counter of some foul plague. There are 3 hits and 3 wounds, with the Bloodreavers only making 1 save. 2 of them fall, their bodies rotting both inside and out. And at the end of the combat phase, every unit within 3 inches of a Nurgle unit gains another counter of disease as their mere presence rots the flesh. At the start of the Battle Shock phase, and this is the morale phase for you 40k fans, the diseases of Nurgle attempt to burst to life. The way this works is you roll a d6 for each counter, and on a 4+, a mortal wound is dealt to that unit. And even worse, after this is done, the disease counter only resets back to 1. 2 dice is rolled, and 2 more Bloodreavers fall to the ground as their bodies give out to the vile disease. Using a second command point, the Bloodthirster roars in fury, commanding the Bloodreavers to hold their ground and not flee this turn. Turn 1 for the Maggotkin. Both sides roll again for command points, and the Nurgle Blight Kings and their leader, the Lord of Blights, moves up. Very slowly, but really 4 inches is as fast as they can move. In addition, at the end of the movement phase, the Bloodreavers are going to take another counter of disease as they are still within 3 inches of the Plague Bearers. Moving to the shooting phase, the Lord of Blights has the ability to hand off a corrupted head from his rack and passes it over to a Blight King. This allows the Blight King to make a shooting attack by throwing a foul makeshift grenade at a unit, getting an attack against every model in that unit up to a max of 7. As a note for our 40k fans, being in close combat does not protect you from being shot at, and the Plague Bearers could care less about a grenade filled with diseases. To them, it's like an air freshener, but 6 dice against the Bloodreavers, hitting on 3s, and wounding on 3s, with 1 rend. 6 dice lands 2 hits, and even worse, those 2 hits are 6s, which means 2 more disease counters from that nasty grenade. They land 1 wound, killing 1 more Bloodreaver. The Blight Kings fail their charge at the Khorgorath, but the Plague Bearers are able to pile in to swing first against the Bloodreaver. In Sigmar, the person whose turn it is picks the unit to fight first, and charging in this game does not confer the strike first ability. 7 attacks from the Plague Bearers. Blessed number of Nurgle sees 6 hits, and 4 of which add disease counters to the unit, bringing the tally up to its maximum of 7 counters. This then lands 4 more wounds total. We're counting the Bloodreavers as having had some cover from the piece of ruins that it's standing on, as everyone is now within 1 inch of the cover, which lets them save 2, but 2 more Reavers fall to the rusted blades. The Bloodreavers swing back, throwing 10 attacks thanks to the buffs from the Bloodsekerator standing in the shadow of the Bloodthirster's wings. They're fighting for their very souls and they get 10 hits, and then a better than average 6 wounds. The Plaguebearers shrug off 3 with their ward saves, and again, because of the buff giving them 2 wounds, only 1 Plaguebearer falls. And at the end of the combat phase, another disease counter would have applied had the Reavers not already had the maximum of 7. This gives 76 dice, dealing mortal wounds on a 4+. And with that roll, the last 3 Bloodreavers collapse to the ground, much to the joy of the Plaguebearers as their mortal bodies succumb to whatever foul fate the diseases of Nurgle have brought upon them. The only consolation is the blood tithe of Khorne is ticked up by 1, for Khorne cares not from whence the blood flows. And with that, that is just the end of the first turn. In turn 2, Khorne declares Finest Hour, giving a buff to the Bloodthirster to wound and save rolls, while the Maggotkin of Nurgle take the extra command point. Khorne wins the roll-off for going first, and the Bloodthirster surges forward, stopping 3 inches away from the Nurgle battle lines, while the Khorgorath and the Bloodsecrator reposition themselves for the next turn. Preparing for a charge, the Bloodthirster easily makes it into combat with the Plaguebearers, though the Khorgorath fails his charge roll. With his artifact and command ability, the Bloodthirster of Insensate Rage calls All Out Attack. This gives him 6 attacks that reroll the hit roll, hitting on 3s, getting all 6 hits. Wounding on 2s, the Bloodthirster lands 4 6s, which triggers his Outrageous Carnage ability 4 times. This means in addition to normal damage, every unit within 8 inches of this model will suffer 4 mortal wounds. This is going to catch every model in the Maggotkin army, putting out 16 mortal wounds to each unit as the Bloodthirster goes on an uncontrolled rampage. Nurgle blesses where it can, as every unit still has that 5-up ward save, which will help even against these mortal wounds. So we're going to start with the Plaguebearers, soaking up 8 of the wounds, though 4 more still fall to the rampage. And to complete the damage against the Plaguebearers, the Bloodthirster's attacks themselves do d6 damage each, totaling up 21 wounds. And at this point we just decide that the last 3 Plaguebearers are going to fall under the insane amount of damage from the Bloodthirster. A quick check will show that the Lord of Blights is unfortunately also caught up in the carnage. The Lord's artifact, the Split Horn Helm, gives him a 4+ ward save. However, it's not enough to save against 16 incoming damage, bringing the blood tithe counter up to 3. Lastly, the Blight Kings have a 5-up ward save, and after all the dice rolling, they still take 9 wounds, which kills the champion and a second model, leaving the third with a wound. And with that, the Bloodthirster single-handedly swings the battle back to Khorne with an amazing set of dice rolls that we're probably never going to see again. In the Maggotkin of Nurgle turn 2, Matt realized that he's made a great mistake, as with his leader dead and the unit champion dead, he has no way to issue commands anymore. So definitely a tactical oversight. With the slow-moving Blight King surrounded on all sides and the mission slipping from his grasp, Matt decides to make the spite play and moves the Blight Kings up in preparation to charge the Bloodthirster. Charging into combat, the Blight Kings get to swing first. Each Blight King gets 5 attacks for 15 attacks total, hitting on 3s and wounding on 3s. The Blight King also puts 3 disease counters on the Bloodthirster, scoring 8 hits, and then 5 wounds with a rend of 1. The Bloodthirster now has a 5+ save, and only sticks 1 dice, taking 4 wounds, bringing it down to a lower bracket. Swinging back, the Bloodthirster still has his 6 attacks, hitting on 4s with full rerolls. 4 hits, and 4 wounds at rend -2. The Blight Kings save 1, and then using their ward saves reduce the number of wounds down to only 6 wounds, killing off another Blight King. And at the end of the combat phase, the Blight Kings pass on another disease point, letting them roll 4 dice, and putting 2 more mortal wounds on the Bloodthirster, slowly dragging him down with their foul plagues. In the roll-off for turn 3, Matt wins the roll, and he opts to go for the double turn. With the slow-moving Blight Kings not going to be able to make it off the table safely, Matt continues with the spite play. If he's going to need to make an injury table roll for his leader, then so is the Bloodthirster. In this turn, the Wheel of Contagion moves to Plague of Misery, which is quite powerful. Heroes without the Nurgle keyword cannot do any heroic actions, which shuts down any command abilities that Khorne wants to do this turn. Jumping straight to the combat phase, Blight Kings land 4 hits, getting 2 more 6s to pass on diseases, and then 2 more wounds. The Bloodthirster fails both, bringing him down to 6 wounds remaining. He swings back but only gets 2 hits, even with rerolling. On the wound roll, the Bloodthirster does trigger Outrageous Carnage, but because of his wounds, he's only able to deal 2 additional mortal wounds, and there's only 1 unit left to hit nearby. The Blight Kings fail both of their saves, and the attacks put out 4 normal wounds. The power of Nurgle then steps in as the Blight Kings absorb 5 of the wounds with their army-wide 5+ ward save, and that means they only take 1 wound. And lastly, at the end of the combat, the disease counters ticks up 1 more time, and the Bloodthirster has 5 counters trying to deal him mortal wounds. 2 more mortal wounds that the Bloodthirster can't heal or save bring him closer to pulling him down. Realizing that the Blight Kings might actually kill the Bloodthirster through the disease counters alone, the Bloodsecrator and the Khorgorath move up to lend their aid. Though the Blight Kings are insanely resilient, and after all is said and done, only 1 Blight King falls, even with the extra attacks, and a few more wounds are placed on the Bloodthirster, inching him ever closer to death. Turn 4 is the final turn of this game, as the Bloodthirster's existence hangs on by a thread, and Nurgle's Wheel of Contagion has 1 final dirty trick left to play. The wheel moves to Nauseous Revulsions. Enemy units that are not Nurgle subtract 1 from their charge rolls, but also cannot finish the pile-in move closer to friendly Nurgle units. Taking full advantage of that, Matt piles in his last Blight King closer to the Bloodthirster. However, it is now more than 1 inch away from the Bloodecrator. The Bloodecrator only has a 1 inch reach, and it's still in the 3 inch Age of Sigmar combat range, effectively keeping everyone in combat, but making it so the Bloodecrator cannot make any attacks due to the pile-in restriction. The dice are thrown, and while the Bloodthirster is finally able to slay the last Blight King, the disease counters have piled up this turn, and at the end of the combat phase we make 1 last disease roll. And with that, the vile plagues of Papa Nurgle have done their work, rotting the Bloodthirster's flesh from the mortal world, sending it back to whence it came. Even though it was a major victory for Khorne, it did not come without its losses, as the Bloodthirster fell in battle, and would now need to make an injury roll in the aftermath phase. So let's start out with Nurgle. All 3 units did die. However, Matt's Lord of Blights only gets away with a minor injury, leaving no lasting effects. Same goes with the Plague Bearers. The Blight Kings, however, throw 2 1s, meaning that in the next match of Path to Glory that Matt plays, 2 Blight Kings are going to be sitting out of that game. However, he's going to spend 1 of his glory points for a once per game reroll on 1 of the dice, and Nurgle blesses the Blight King, letting him recover. So that means in the next game, Matt will only start out with 4 Blight Kings in his unit. In my Khorne army, the Bloodthirster rolls a critical injury. However, I also spend the glory point for the once per aftermath phase reroll. He only ends up with a minor injury, saving him from starting out with any wounds, and he's going to recover fine for the next battle. For the Bloodreavers, only 1 model needs to sit out in the next round while we find a replacement, an acceptable gift to Khorne for granting us victory. And we hope that you've enjoyed our first Age of Sigmar battle report, and our first time using the new Maggotkin of Nurgle book. I know we missed a few things, like we forgot Matt's sub-faction that lets his Blight Kings explode to hand out more diseases when they die, maybe a few other things, but Once again, thank you all for your support in 2021. And if you're watching this in 2022, then welcome and Happy New Year. We'll be playing even more Age of Sigmar along with 40k and one more special non-GW game in this upcoming year as we try to bring you even more content and continue to grow the channel. If you like the direction that we're going, do consider hitting that sub button to let us know that you like this. 2022 is going to be great, and we hope you come along with us for the ride. So thank you so much everyone for your support, and peace out.